Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the second episode of Everything But a Normal Podcast. I am your host, David Boris, and today, ladies and gentlemen, we have some very exciting news that I did some extensive research on, and let me tell you, these two stories I'm about to tell you, if they don't make you entertained, then I really don't know what I could really do to honestly further your experience here at Everything But Normal Podcast. I have to say, these stories were very in detail. When I was looking them up, I made sure that everything I read was factual and not being smudged. Now, I'll tell you what, the story I have in front of you, again, I can't stress enough how cool it is. I have a couple announcements to make beforehand, so I will do those now, and then we'll jump right into the two stories I got in store for us. So the first announcement I have to make is for the students who listen to the podcast. I am looking for guest hosts and stars and, people just to come on the show, talk, just so I'm not in this room all by myself. I actually do have a special guest here with me right now, unless he's unable to talk, so he's not really a good guest. His name's Little Mayo. He's a little stuffed animal doll I got for Valentine's Day. And happy Valentine's Day, everybody out there. He was a present for my girlfriend. You can see him on Instagram. He is going to be with me every time I record. So that's just going to be a tradition now. He's amazing. You can follow me on Instagram at Everything But Normal Podcast. That was also freshly made this week. Also, I guess another announcement to add in there. We're currently standing at 14 followers, which, that's not bad for the first week. I'd say we're on a good roll here, people. Without further ado, though, we're going to jump into the first news story, which I am extremely excited to report on. So the first article I have for you guys are about super rats. That's right, you heard me correct. Super rats over in Asia at the moment. But I'm more talking about cities over in Asia. More specifically, Tokyo, Japan, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. You name the place, they're probably there. Now, I know the first question you're going to ask me, David, what is a super rat? And I'm so glad you asked that because honestly, I wasn't too aware of what I was actually reading and watching because I did both researching. And I come to find out that these rats are super because they are immune to poison and are a lot more intellectual than your actual common rat. Now, I don't know the whole detail about how these rats became to be, but when I did some further investigating on how these rats developed over time, a lot of people have grown theories about it, and I think that it's actually kind of a unique theory that you can somewhat maybe can relate to, and on the same hand also get that sense of, well, maybe it's possible, maybe it's not. That's just something I guess you're going to have to judge on your own. Let's talk about these super rats then. So what makes these super rats super besides not being, killed by poison easily? In the one video I watched, it was a Vice documentary called Super Rats, The Invincible Super Rats Genetically Resistant to Poison. It was published by Vice on May 17th of 2018. I stumbled across the video not too long ago, but it was one of those videos where it's late at night and you had to double check yourself just to make sure that, you're watching, something legit. And Vice has never really reported anything that is beyond, superstition. They do some really funky videos dealing often with the drug market, drug cartels, mafias, violence, and the really weird stuff. I'm quickly looking here on the up next for Vice videos. We have one here, the rising Mexican black tar heroin conjuring the dead at Venezuela's fire ceremony. You have all these different things where it's more documentation of things that I want to report on compared to things that are not really reported on every day in the actual world. When I stumbled across this video, I really was just thinking super rats. Oh, it must have been another scientifically experimented rat that is just going around and plaguing people almost like the Black Plague over, during those times in the 14th century and stuff. When time came for this, though, I was totally flustered when the videos were, it just opened with these rats climbing all over a city. And in reality, I think most Americans are afraid of rats. We often associate people to being rats if they're often deceiving or often just not a nice person in general. But it was weird to see that how far rats have gone over in Asia and how they are now adapting to an environment in which they are just outsmarting everything from traps to causing overall mayhem across what would be a lot of Asia's cities. So it's incredible to actually see how these rats are actually making their way through the city and how they're outsmarting simple basic poisons, in which I'm going to go into more detail about just now. So these rats essentially then, what they have going for them is they go off of instinct. They are more aware of their ancestors' wrongdoings, such as getting into rat traps, eating rat poison. They actually grown immune to said poisons. And in the video, they were talking about a specific drug that is used to kill rats often of times called warfarin. Now, warfarin is known to many humans as a blood thinner, in which case the rat would eat the warfarin and the rat would essentially just bleed from the inside and just die. What happens with these super rats, though, is there is a chemical in them from their ancestors that prevent them from actually bleeding as tough. And that one chemical compound in them is called VROK. And essentially what it is, it's a protein that thickens their blood. So essentially that any poison that they are given that is a weak, small, minute dose of what would be normal rat poison is just simply not cutting it anymore. And they're getting away with it. These rats, again, they're just immune to any poison. They're outsmarting a lot of traps. They actually did an experiment in the video going into like how the traps and how they go about setting the traps and how the rats just are not budging because they are not familiar with a new trap in an area, or the food is not right and it's not in the correct position. It's like these rats are almost reading as good as we are now with a sense of danger, and the only way they know how to keep on living is reproducing. You have an enemy that you can't even fight, essentially, and you're going against pretty much an equal evil mind that you can't even get around because you need to find the solution that's harming a city. In the video also, a gentleman mentioned that they're going into homes in like holes that are the size of about 3 centimeters big. And that's not big. I should have said small. It's an incredible size that these rats are able to maneuver around the city, up skyscrapers, inside little holes. So when these rats climb in these holes then, what they're essentially doing is they're going to where they feel a nesting area would be needed. So you're talking most electrical boxes, you're talking anywhere that has a pretty hard cover on it. And what happens is even if you lock it, these rats have really, really, really sharp teeth. They show the teeth in the video. In the video, these teeth look like, you could probably compare them to like the size of like a twig or a straw. But these rats are gnawing through wires. They're gnawing through wood. They're gnawing through like chain link fences. These rats are actually physically destroying the city internally, and people can't stop it. So another thing to also mention in this story is that a lot of their government over there is against the use of poisoning rats beyond warfarin. And what that means is there's a big conflict of interest of how to properly dispose of the rats. There are people over there, almost like animal rights activists, that are sticking around and trying to say that these rats' lives, they're just as normal as human. The government backs that. So it's a very complicated system of how people actually want to get rid of these rats. But the one corporation that the man works for in the video, he claims that he's doing it for the well-being of the humans in Asia, and until people don't want rats dead, which I really can't see happening, they're forever going to be there. And they're not really going away at any rate, and a lot of people are being affected by it. People have died in their beds, elderly people, since they really are bed-stricken. There's a lot of cases of just houses catching on fire from short circuits and wires that have been destroyed from these rats. these rats are really causing a problem, and you're not really hearing about it. And at least I haven't heard about it until I watched Vice's news report online. And I have to say, I have to give Vice a lot of credit. They did a lot of extensive research into this, and it's one of those things where I can actually break down a conspiracy theory from this. So what my conspiracy theory then is, and I can say you can try to argue with me on this because I feel it's pretty valid. So what happens is, in the video, the man mentions that this is a hereditary come down from, rats being abused and killed, and just overall just them kind of just making a statement in which they want to just stick around a little bit longer and they don't want to die off as easy. What they're essentially saying then is that this has been passed down from a generation of rats that obviously want to evolve and stay alive, reproduce, and, carry on their name. So the theory I propose then is when these nuclear bombs over in Japan went off, the place was a wasteland. Like I said, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Tokyo, but that nuclear fallout has carried quite away. It affected all of Japan. And during that time, a lot of rats were not used to and or exposed to radiation. But that protein and blood thickening could be caused by nuclear radiation. So I guess the theory I'm trying to prove here then is, are these rats potentially genetically modified from the radiation from back when the bombs were dropped? That is a question I guess you could propose, and apparently has been tossed out there in the past. It's one of those theories where you could and can't prove it. But they are using several different techniques now to just exterminate the rats, from pheromones to see how they get eased and how they get alerted. They're just trying everything at this moment to take these rats out, and it's simply not working out for them. So without further ado, everybody, we're going to continue on to the next news segment, which I realized I was talking for a very long time on the last news article, so this one might be a little shorter than the last one, and it is a lot shorter of a topic to talk about. Now, as we all know, motorbikes in the world that we know today are not safe for anyone, really. The rider's going to say, well, I wear a helmet, I wear a jacket, I wear all these things to protect me. But the story I'm talking about up next now, this story is diving a little deeper into the motorcycling world over in Indonesia. Now, again, this is a Vice article. Both articles were quoted on Vice today. So the story I'm talking about right now is titled, "The Indonesian Teenagers Competing in Illegal Drag Races." So when you hear drag races, you often think the fast cars, the fast motorbikes, and, they're just racing. Well, in this video, they have a correspondent that heads over to Indonesia and talks to these teenagers who are illegally street racing on the streets of Indonesia for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, which helps keep income coming, better performing bikes, just something that, is not really, again, mentioned at all in the news. Why? I don't feel it's that, world news-ish. I don't feel like they need to report that. But this is also one of those news that, it's an interesting news story that, you can somewhat be like, wow, that's actually happening across the world, and I had no idea this existed. So essentially what's happening over in Indonesia is that a lot of teenagers are getting into street races or drag races in the middle of the day and or night. Typically they go at night because it's illegal to do any of it, actually. But what happens is they go out and they performance enhance, if you could, their bikes illegally, and they race for, again, hundreds and thousands of dollars. It's incredible, actually, to watch the full documentary on it. It's only about 20 minutes long, and the kids are just 16, 12. They're small. They're young kids. They're really young kids, and it's really scary to think that is another form of income for them. The main person they follow is a 16-year-old boy who is sponsored. Now, that's a big word, to be saying, because this kid is sponsored by a team, and this kid is living, well, they say in the video, he's living a better lifestyle than most middle-class Indonesians do. He has a car. He has his performance-enhanced bike. He has pretty much his own house. His friends, his team are all living in it. It's a whole it's a whole culture change to something that we don't see over here in America very often. We don't see, illegal drag racing going on side streets. At least I don't. I'm in bed by like 10 o'clock. So, I mean, if there's something, like a drag race going on outside my house, I haven't heard it. No loud cars or anything. So, okay, so what happens now in the story is pretty much that these kids now are racing illegally on like Indonesian public roads, which are obviously populated. People have died from it. The cops are actually having a problem keeping up with all the bikes that have to be rainbowed. So in Indonesia, the police are trying to crack down on stopping all these street races, and they're just trying to simply reform how these street races are gone. There are regular competitions that are done on the weekends, as said in the video, but they do race illegally for money late at night. And then what happens after the race is the streets all fill up again, and that's it. The race is over, and the person takes their money, and they go home. It's a whole nother change of events, like just seeing how these kids are living their lives at like 16 and like being young adults, essentially going in and running a life of, I would say, just metal mayhem on the roads of Indonesia, trying to make money, trying to make a name for themselves. And they're all over Instagram, apparently. They said that they promote themselves on Instagram and social media, and they try to get famous so they can become like professional motorbike racing professionals, I guess. And it's one of those things where it could happen, it could not happen. It could be just another kid dying in the street of Indonesia by a car crash, or it's going to be, something even more serious than that. It's one of those stories where I watched the video again and I said to myself, that's something I need to talk about. I feel that's just interesting news. Like, I mean, I kind of expected Indonesia to have some weird quirk to them. I never really heard anything from Indonesia that was really weird and out there, but when I saw that they're illegally street racing motorbikes over there and the cops are having problems with it and kids are dying and there's a lot of different alternatives to, what they could be doing. This is what their life is. This is what they grew up liking and loving, and this is where they are now in life. And, I think it's one of those things where it's not going to stop unless they they just find the problem and the solution for it. But they said in the video, those competitions that they have on the weekends that are official, those are city and like actual organization ran. They don't have enough money to provide an actual winner with a lot of money. It's just kind of like you win the trophy, you go home, you take like maybe $50 home with you to their money, and that would be it. It's not like these street races where you're going to race for a lot more high stake reward. It's like high risk, high reward type of racing. And it's one of those things where, again, I would never put myself in this situation, but this is a lifestyle to someone who actually, I could say, actually doesn't care about dying, but instead looks more forward to simply just getting money, racing, making a name for yourself, and just simply not dying in the process. Again, I thought that was some very strange information that, I mean, you probably didn't know, I didn't know, and it's apparently just a big problem over there. So that's going to be it for this episode of Everything But Normal podcast. Thank you so much for listening to the end of the video, everyone. I'm so happy that I'm actually getting some followers. I'm getting some viewers. Again, I am on Instagram, and I am looking for a co-host. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you probably didn't hear my intro, but that's okay, and that was me clapping. With that being said, everyone, this is me, David Boris, your host, signing out. I will see you hopefully next week. I'm not too sure. The weather, again, it's looking like snow, and I'm really not looking forward to the weather in the upcoming weeks. So without further ado, everyone, this is it. Second episode of the podcast down the chute, and I'm excited to make more episodes for you guys in the next upcoming weeks. Stay tuned, guys, and remember, stay strange.